Hello everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar on leveraging on product lifecycle assessment and environmental product declaration effectively to drive more business. I am here today with Ernests Ozolins from UPB and in Latvia, and we will soon be starting our webinar. We can maybe wait a couple of minutes more as we see that there are some people joining right now. But I can tell you already that the structure of today's webinar will be so that I will give a short introduction on environmental product declarations, how they are made and their importance also. And then Ernest will be talking about his experience with UPB on doing EPDs with one-click LCA. So if you have any questions, you can send them in the chat, and we will also reserve some time after the presentations from both of us so that we can discuss a little bit further, and we will also answer some of your questions during this time. So let's wait just a couple of minutes more to make sure that everyone is here with us. Okay. All right. I think that we can start. So I will be sharing my screen at first, and I will start giving an introduction on environmental product declaration. Then I will pass the turn to Ernest, who will follow with his presentation on the EPDs made by UPB. So I will just now share my screen. Okay. So let's start. We are going to be talking about how to leverage product lifecycle assessment and environmental product declaration effectively to drive more business. And to start, I will give a short introduction on one-click LCA. Then we will see what is an EPD and how to calculate it. We will also go through the European roadmap for decarbonization and the CBAM regulations that are coming in place very soon. We will also talk about, at the end, LCA for products with the help of one-click LCA. Well, to start, for us at one-click LCA, our mission is powering the makers of a zero-carbon future, and we do this through the different sets of tools that we have for building, infrastructure, and manufacturing, or Product LCA. We are the world's leading construction and manufacturing LCA software, present worldwide in over 130 countries, offering all global data, so all the publicly available EPDs that have passed our quality test have been integrated into our software. We can integrate with more than 50 different types of other software. And we are a Finnish company based here in Helsinki with more than 20 years of existence, and as of today, a bit over 170 people in our staff. We are very proud to power the makers of a zero-carbon future in different segments, for example, in the architecture, engineering, and consultancy sectors. As you can see, we have a very variated, I would say, customers working with us, as you can see here from different companies that are our customers that you might already know some of them. Also on the manufacturing segment, as today we will be talking with UPP, who is also our customer, and talking about their experience as well in developing EPDs. We are a global platform with data and tools for compliance, and we make carbon easier to understand and to act on. So I will be very brief on this introduction part so that we can focus a bit more on the EPDs. So why is it important to talk about EPDs? Because the construction segment especially is responsible for over 40% of the global carbon emissions. And the way that we have been building as of today is very much fast. And if we continue to do it so that we are doing today, the global building stock will double in 40 years. So it would be the equivalent of building a New York City every month. So if we actually want to tackle this issue and solve this problem, we have to do it from the different perspectives. And not only are we talking about building an infrastructure here, but what are buildings and infrastructures made of? They are made of different products, different materials, and those also need to undergo the life cycle analysis so that we know exactly what we are producing in terms of carbon from a very detailed perspective. So EPDs, they are environmental product declarations, and they are a trustworthy document attesting for the environmental performance of your product. So you could do, for example, life cycle assessment of a building, of an infrastructure, of any type of product with, for example, generic data or adapted data. But of course, that if you have the data of the product itself, the level of detail is much higher. And that also reflects on all the calculations made using this EPD, because the precision of those calculations will also increase. So the environmental product declarations, they are based on different standards, from the ISO 14025 to the European standard, the EN 15804 with its newest version plus A2. Also the ISO 21930 and others that are more country specific. It is verified by a third party and published by a program operator that has their own product category rules that also the EPD needs to take into consideration. And it provides the environmental performance data only. So there's no need to share manufacturer-sensitive information. It uses the life cycle assessment methodology that we will see shortly, and it can be representative of a product and a factory, or several products and several factories or manufacturing sites, or also of various manufacturers. So it has many possibilities. The EPDs are usually valid for 5 years if they are done with the Type 3 declaration EPD with the data from the past year of production. So for the life cycle assessment methodology, how does it work? So we have the sources of embodied carbon across the construction and manufacturing life cycle that go from the A stage, which represents the product stage, in which we take into consideration the raw material extraction, transport to the manufacturing site, the manufacturing process itself, then the construction, the transport to where the material will be installed, and then the installation of this material. This methodology is used both for buildings and for products as well. After this, we have the use stage, which is the B stage, in which use, maintenance, repair, replacement, and refurbished are considered. It's very usual that in EPDs, the use stage is not present, but for some products, it's needed to be there as well. It can also be declared voluntarily, but it's not necessarily mandatory for all kinds of products. After this, we have the C stage, that is comprised by the end of life. So it's everything about the construction of that material, the transportation to the waste handling facility, the waste processing, and the disposal. Apart from these, we also have in the use stage the operational energy and water use, and we also have another stage, which is the D stage, that comes with the benefits and loads beyond the system boundary. So now we're going to talk about the European roadmap for decarbonization and the CBAM. And it's very important to talk about these because as of very recently, doing EPDs has been in a way voluntarily, but this is about to change and very fast. So the European Green Deal is climate pact setting in motion different policies by the European Commission to review the laws on climate merits and to introduce new legislation on circular economy, building renovation, biodiversity, farming and innovation. In terms of the targeted emission reductions, so they have been changed from 50% to 55% by 2030, with the goal of making Europe the first climate neutral continent by 2050. So if these goals are going to be met, there has to be other policies that are going to detail how these goals are going to be met. And these will affect not only the construction of buildings and infrastructure, but also the products that are involved in it. In terms of the proposal regulation for eco-design for sustainable products, there are some guidelines that are being taken into consideration. For example, extending the product life cycle, reducing products' carbon and environmental footprint through the life cycle assessment methodology, ensuring products are in line with circular economy principles and carbon neutrality, also minimizing and preventing waste while focusing on material recovery, and minimizing the material's potential for recycling. This is very important also for products because not only in terms of legislation, but if we take the legislation apart, buyers and specifiers, they want to know what are the impacts of the products that they are purchasing, that they are specifying. And they also want to be able to choose green products. So they want to be able to know that, okay, this is a green product, so I will go with this. It's also very important to have EPDs because they are required by regulations that mandate LCA. So they mandate LCA for buildings, for infrastructure, but not for the product itself. Although if you do have the EPDs, you will get extra points for it. So there are already in many countries, especially in Europe, these regulations that if you want to build, you need to do LCA. So it's very important to have the specific information on the products that are going into those buildings. And also it's required by commercial certifications for extra points as well. In terms of the proposal for the regulation on energy performance of buildings directive for buildings, we have that the disclosure of carbon footprint for all new buildings over 200 square meters by 2027 will be necessary. And then the disclosure of carbon footprint for all new buildings by 2030 will be also set in place. And the energy performance of buildings will also need to be accounted for. So these are the new regulations that are coming for Europe in the next years. In terms of the carbon border adjustment mechanism, it is a carbon tariff that is being set in place for certain products as of now that are imported into the European Union. The goal with the CBAM is to avoid the risk of carbon leakage, to prevent the carbon incentive products from filling the European market, and also to reduce the emissions in international trade, as well as encouraging a cleaner industrial production worldwide. So basically, the idea of the carbon border adjustment mechanism is to have some kind of equivalency between products and their emissions that are produced within the EU and outside of the EU. So they want to prevent that the industry is focusing only in costs and exporting, for example, cheaper materials that have a higher impact than the more local materials that can possibly have a lower impact, but might be a bit more expensive. So it's also about responsibility. It's about environmental responsibility. There is an adaptation period that has started from 1st of October of this year and will take place until December of 2025 for selected goods that have a high risk of carbon leakage. And we will see how this will go in the next months. So to finish, we are going to talk a little bit about LCA for products with the help of One-Click LCA. In One-Click LCA, we have our EPD generator software that can help our customers as an end-to-end solution. So we are able to have the calculation tool for EPDs focused on the construction industry. We have also templates of different materials that can be used and save time for the calculations, as well as for the report for the EPDs. And we also have a partnership with EPD Hub, who is a program operator. And we are also able to help our customers through the verification and publication process with EPD Hub directly. The EPD generator comes with calculations that are compliant with many different norms, as the ones I have mentioned before. And with the EPD generator, it's possible also to use EcoInvent data, which is an upstream database for doing EPDs and LCA. So this is just how the EPD, after being published, would look like with EPD Hub. So it's just summarizing what I mentioned earlier, that there is a solution that is end-to-end. And also for the upcoming free trainings in 2024, as this is our last webinar of the year. In 2024, we will have the LCA, Construction LCA Bootcamp, focusing on building LCA and infrastructure from January to February in 2024. And we will have also the EPD Bootcamp coming later on in February 2024. These are courses that issue certificates for the participants who concluded successfully after an exam. And it's also possible to get a discount for the first year subscription of a license with One-Click LCA after passing the exam for them. So with this, I want to say thank you. And I will now stop sharing. And I will now ask Ernest to take on the lead and tell us a little bit more about his experience with One-Click LCA in making EPDs for UPB's products.
Yeah, hello. I'll start by sharing my screen. Okay, yeah, so hi, I'm Ernest. I'm from UPB. I'm a product manager of precast concrete products. And today I'm going to talk to you about CO2 net zero strategies and the short-term activities that we as a group are taking to reach these targets. But firstly, about UPB Group. We are one of the leading industrial holdings in the Baltic states, and we provide full design and build projects products for Latvian and also export markets. We are 30 plus years in business, and we have 2,000 plus employees working in the company. About the CO2 problem, and why do we even bother reducing emissions? It's like the carbon emissions cause the greenhouse effect, which then leads to climate change. But climate change then causes an increase in the natural disasters such as wildfires, hurricanes, floods, and so on. Then in 2015, there was the Paris Agreement, where countries around the world agreed to reduce the carbon emissions made by each of the countries, and that kick-started the thinking about emissions and so on. But then in 2021, EU signed a climate act, which essentially stated that by 2050, EU wants to become a carbon neutral continent. And that then also causes new rivalries between companies to see which company can provide a greener solution for each of the projects. Then what are the net zero strategies that can be implemented? Firstly, we can start by minimizing waste, which would be prefabricated products instead of cast on site. We can also build efficiently, which would utilize the construction to the fullest. We could reuse materials, we can use carbon efficient materials and products. Then we could also build cleverly, build less, or build nothing. As you can see in the graph, building nothing is the most efficient way of reducing carbon, as you just don't produce anything. But us as a company, we mostly work in this minimizing waste and building efficiently scope, because we are not the developers who can choose to build cleverly or build less. Keeping that in mind, the Cement Association, the Global Cement Association, has created a study where they see what parts of concrete production are going to impact the net zero roadmap by 2050 for the construction industry. And the biggest part of this pie goes to carbon capture and storage or utilization. And we, as a producer of concrete, we can't implement that. But what we can do is we can work with our cement suppliers and other suppliers to make sure that they're pushing the boundaries of the CO2 limits that they are achieving. But then what we can do as a producer is we can produce the concrete more efficiently. We can also work with concrete recipes to make sure that we are not using too much material or too much cement to achieve similar strength characteristics of concrete. And we can utilize more efficient design. We can design the construction not for 50 years, but let's say for 100 years, which is going to be much more carbon efficient. And there's also the savings in cements and binders. We can replace some cement in the concrete with alternative binders, and so on. Then, as a group, our road to carbon neutrality started in 2015 when we created our first initial EPDs. In this case, we didn't do it ourselves, but there was an outside company that did it for us. But then in 2017, we started using green energy in the factories instead of the normal energy that can be produced from fossil fuels. And then in 2018, we had implemented a new steel mesh welding machine in the factory that significantly reduced our steel waste amounts in production. And then in 2019, there was this concrete research center, which is like internal brains for concrete production. There was a great reorganization of that, which led to 2020 when we updated our EPDs and achieved much better results. Not only because we did all of these things before, but we also used one-click LCA to produce our EPDs this time ourselves, which allowed us to really understand what makes up the carbon footprint of our product. Then in 2021, we implemented a concrete and wastewater recycling system in our production facilities. And in 2022, we developed our first reduced carbon strategies for production and also moved from CEM 1 to CEM 2 as a default cement in the factory. Then this year, we started using the recycled water in concrete manufacturing, as well as already updated our EPDs from 2020. As you can see, the amount of years between each EPD is already starting to shrink. And then next year, we are planning to use even greener cement as our current CEM 2 as a default cement in production. And then in 2025, we're planning to increase the recycled aggregate content in our concrete. And then the aim for 2030 is to produce the first concrete for which the cement has been produced with the carbon capture technology. And that would be our aim for the carbon neutral concrete in the future. But then what are the CO2 reduction methods in prefabricated concrete? And there are 5 pillars, which are the concrete composition and the binder improvements in the concrete. There's this manufacturing and product use part of the emissions. There's also the product formulation and solution that can also improve or make the CO2 results worse. And as we're working in the export market quite a lot, transportation is also a big part of our overall emissions. And then here we created a table in which we can see that several options in how to reduce the emissions and their efficiently, approximate cost, and longevity. For example, GGBS, which is a cement replacement material, but that we can use in concrete. It is really highly efficient in reducing the CO2 emissions. It's moderately priced, but the longevity, in this case, it stated here high, but our newest thinking is that it's closer to moderate to low because other, let's say, steel producers and globally are also reducing their amounts of GGBS that is produced. That means that more people want the same material for the better emissions. But here we want to highlight the carbon capture technology, which is highly efficient in reducing the emissions as it captures the CO2 right at the cement plant. But it's also really costly. But we also know that the longevity of this technology should be high. Going forward, yes, we also looked at several ways of how to power our trucks by hydrogen, electricity, biofuels, and so on. So it's really holistic approach of looking at every single part of the product and how we can optimize it for better CO2 results. And another really important thing when looking at EPDs is the units of measurement. For example, there's a precast concrete wall here. If we would look at the CO2 emissions, then a cubic meter of this wall would have 330 kilograms of CO2. But then a square meter of this wall, the same wall, would have 62 kilograms of CO2. Then 1 ton of this wall would have 130 kilograms of CO2. So you can see the difference between what is the reference unit that you're looking at and how that affects the CO2 results. But finally, when we actually build a building, what we're looking for is the CO2 result for usable surface square meter area of the building. Looking a little bit more closely to the EPD itself, what we pay attention to when we look at other producers' EPDs or our supplier EPDs, it's the place of production. So are we buying the product from a certified place? And also really important is the validity date. So is this EPD valid? And as I said before, it's really important to also look at the functional unit. So what is the declared unit of the product in the EPD? And then what we, as a producer and many people, the only thing they look for is the A1 to A3 number, which is the climate change total. Of course, all the other parameters that are calculated are really important, but currently our main focus is the CO2 number. And then when looking at the building, what we did was we calculated emissions for a full building and also looked at which are the elements of the building that produce most CO2. And in this case, there were hollow core slab elements, one-layer walls, and sandwich walls, which are 3-layer concrete wall panels. So these 3 panel types combined produced almost 89% of the total emissions of the building. So these are the most important panels to be optimized for the CO2. And then looking a little bit closer at let's say, our road to this year's 2023 EPD, and also strategies on how to reduce the emissions even more. So when we do the EPD or calculate CO2, we can not only look at the total emissions of, let's say, a single layer wall element, we look at the parts of the element that produce the emissions. In this case, it's the concrete, it's the steel reinforcement, it's the steel details, and then we also look at our production emissions. What we can see here that from 2020, there was improvements in almost every part of the product. So there were improvements in concrete CO2 emissions, as well as a big improvement in our steel reinforcement emissions. And this led to this year's EPD. But then during this process, we also developed 2 different strategies on how to reduce the CO2 even further, which are mostly concrete strategies, and we can obviously do some lab tests and see, yes, this concrete composition might be good at CO2 reduction, but then obviously we have to check if what we think on an Excel spreadsheet actually results in lower CO2 emissions, and that then we plug in the numbers in the Product LCA, and then we see, yes, our theory was correct, and then let's say the strategies B and C allowed us to reduce approximately by 10% for each step the CO2 emissions of the product. Yeah, you can see the results here. And as I mentioned before, we work mostly in export markets, which means that not only the product use case, the A1 to A3 CO2 emissions are really important, but also we need to optimize transportation emissions. That involves checking which transport option is better for each of the legs of the transportation. So let's say, is it more efficient to transport by sea to London, or is it more efficient to haul it from Latvia to London by truck? Because the differences in kilometers vary and everything varies. So you need to check which is the not only financially but also in CO2 way the most efficient way to do things. But then what is driving these lower emissions is the carbon emission limits in many countries in Europe. In Sweden, from 2025, there will be limiting values for buildings that are, in this case, 6.6 to 9.2 kilograms per CO2 per usable square meter per year. In this case, we're taking 50-year design life as an example. And the buildings in Sweden and UK, Denmark, France, and Finland, that's the overall CO2 emission of the whole building. And the frame, the concrete and steel is only one part of it. So we have to fit in to this number. And what is important is that these goals of countries are only going to be reduced further. So by 2030, Sweden wants to reduce their emissions by 61% compared to 2020. And what we find is that currently we are able to achieve these targets, but when it's coming to 2030 and beyond, we see that it is only going to be more challenging to achieve them. And that's why we still need to evolve and evolve. And as you saw initially, if from 2015 to 2020, we updated our EPD every 5 years, then from 2020, we already skipped 2 years and updated our EPD in 3 years time. We see that in the future, it is only going to be a shorter period of time when there's enough improvement in the result that a new EPD should be created to show the improvement. And then in summary, what we as a company, net zero strategies, where we work is we minimize waste and build efficiently. For net zero roadmap, we optimize concrete production, we substitute cement clinker, we improve efficiency in design and construction. For the CO2 reduction strategies, we see that carbon capture is going to be most effective for cement decarbonization. And during this CO2 calculation cycle and EPD generation and verification, we as a manufacturer have produced two improvement strategies for CO2. And we see that CO2 limiting values for buildings is a reality, and the limiting values are only going to decrease in the future. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ernest. That was very, very, very good to see how it works also for you on this side, representing UPP as a manufacturer, and how also having the EPDs, and not just having the EPDs, but working on your product LCA has had an impact to the company business as well, and how it will impact also in the future, and how you're taking that into consideration for your strategy too. Yes, that was very good to see. We have a few questions here on the chat that maybe we can start to answer, and feel free to also send us more questions, but I will read them here and then we can take them together. The first one came from Magdalena Popescu, and that was about the pricing of the LCA program. Well, that will vary. It depends on the type of license. It depends on the type of features that you're going to have with each license, also number of users. So that's a more kind of personal needs kind of thing. So maybe we can get back to that. I can get back to you after the webinar, and we can talk a little bit more to see that for you. Let me check also. The other question was from Stefan Noel. Do you encourage LCA practitioners to collect data, especially for the main manufacturing data and or along the supply chain, or to use ready-to-use data? So Ernest, do you want to take that from your perspective and how you have been doing and dealing with the data collection?
Yes, so in our experience, you want as much data as you can get. If you have your own collected data, you will most probably have better results in the end, because the data that you would take off the shelf is going to be an average of many producers, and will most likely not represent your company the best way.
Yes, I completely agree. And for us at One Click LCA, we always encourage our customers to also gather as much data as possible from their own suppliers. There is a possibility of doing the input of private data when a supplier has, for example, an innovative methodology for production, or something that is like some kind of secret to some extent that they can share just part of it that can be added to, and that is the part that would be useful and added to the calculation of the EPD. So we can do the input with private data as well, but the best is always to have the more specific type of data that you can have. The ready-to-use data or generic data, any other kind of data, is usually that is not the data that is representative, as Ernest said, of your own manufacturing process and product. These are data that I would say are to be used in a last case scenario, that you don't have a way to gather the data of the process or the product itself. and you still need to add it to your calculations. So it would be more for like this kind of situation, I would say. Let's check here. We have also another question above. That's from Magdalena Popesco. And she says, I'm wondering if your software can be used for LCA calculations of steel product. I'm interested to buy your software, but I am not sure if we can use it for metallurgy. Thank you. Well, I think that Ernest can also tell us about this.
Yes, so one-click can definitely be used to produce an EPD for steel products. Our sister company produces steel products and also creates EPDs with one-click.
Yes, exactly. So that was a very good question, because we have here exactly someone who has done it before for steel. So thank you, Ernest. Okay, let's check also another question above. We have from Rimantas Lakstauskas. What is the difference between EPD and LCA term-wise? LCA calculation is a part of EPD document. So the LCA is the life cycle analysis, which is a methodology. So it's a methodology that considers the process of the life cycle, from the extraction of raw material to deconstruction, and also the benefits coming after that. So if the product gets recycled, reused, or it's used for production of energy, or even if it gets disposed, this whole process has to be considered. So it is a methodology, and this methodology can be used for different purposes. It can be used for buildings, it can be used for products, and if used for products, it can be used for issuing the environmental product declaration, because it's the method, LCA is the methodology used to prove the results that are shown and shared in the environmental product declaration. So I guess that kind of sums up the difference. Ernest, what do you think? Is there something you'd like to add?
No, I think you answered the question fully, so I have nothing to add to your statement.
All right. So, Rimatas, let us know if that was clear, and if there's any other questions you would like to ask. Also, if you guys would like, let me check the chat also here. So if you guys would like to send us more questions, please feel free to do that. I also have some questions for Ernest. So in terms of how you have been working with, we mentioned steel and concrete, and steel is one of the products that are already listed for this early part of the CBAM regulation. So have you had any consideration on how this regulation will affect your business, and also how are you planning on adapt to it? I know that your market is mainly in Europe, so still, have you had yet any kind of ideas on how to deal with this regulation coming?
Yes, so as in the recent years, we're trying to optimize our chain of suppliers, supply chain, which means that we're purchasing the products from quite locally, which means that this regulation is not going to impact us directly, but might impact our suppliers. And yeah. So
the there will be probably a need to like see how to deal with it in terms of the suppliers and also your own strategy as a company to adapt to it.
Yeah, so we would need to work with our suppliers quite a lot to make sure all the documentation is ready.
Yes, that's good. That's very good. Yes, and also I wanted to ask you, you mentioned that you did the EPDs in different years, and now that the time between doing the EPDs and updating them has been shortened. So how do you see the market situation as of now after doing the EPDs for your products and also after updating them in a shorter period of time? Do you see that there is a demand from your customers to have this type of documentation ready, even though it hasn't been yet mandatory, let's put it like this?
Definitely, we see that the interest and demands of our clients, especially in our export markets, such as the Nordic states and like the Western Europe, they want to see EPDs, like verified EPDs, that we can show that our product produces that much CO2. But not only that they want to see that, they want to use these CO2 numbers and EPDs in their BREEAM and LEED certification schemes. And we also have worked in like a pilot null CO2 project, which is a helioterrace in Sweden, where we had to work closely with the client to optimize our concrete mixes and so on, create a sister EPD of the product that we delivered on site to verify that the building was able to achieve this null CO2 verification. So, and as well as that, we see that many other producers in our target markets also produce these EPDs and produce them quicker and quicker. So as I mentioned in the slides, the rivalry between companies is getting stronger.
That's a good information to know and to share also, because we have been seeing also this trend that the EPDs are now also a huge differential when a supplier is being chosen, for example, or product is being specified. So it also brings me to my next question, which is, do you see the return in investment from the R&D perspective? That's like your investment in R&D and how it has given UPB a return in terms of having this focus on working on your product and making improvements on it to be a more environmental friendly products, and how having the response from your customers and your markets. So do you see this return in the investment?
Yes, so I believe that there is a good return on the investment when it comes to looking on the ways of reducing emissions. There are several projects that we wouldn't even be looked at from a client's perspective if we didn't have the same EPD or some ways of reducing the emissions. And yeah, so I believe that without this further investing of the time and resources, there's no way that we are going to stay competitive in the market.
Yes. Yes, that's something that, from my perspective at least, I have been seeing a lot as something that is becoming more and more frequent, that tenders or any kind of long-term contract that is coming in terms of suppliers, that they want to have the manufacturers have EPDs, and that is, like you mentioned, a condition that if you don't have an EPD, you're not even considered to continue in the process. So this is something that is really a driver to push forward to have the EPDs, and it's something that really makes the company to be competitive, because those who, like you, have already invested in it and have the EPDs, you are, of course, much better in terms of competitive, better positioned than others who are not there yet. So that's very, very interesting to see. Let's just check here if we have some more questions. I believe not yet, but yeah, I would say that one more question also that I wanted to ask you was about in terms of your usability of one-click LCA. How was it useful when you were comparing the two different recipes of concrete that you mentioned? That when you did the update on the EPDs, so how was it useful for improving and the R&D process? What kind of information were you able to extract from one-click LCA, and how did you use it for the development of the new recipe?
Yeah, so I think the biggest or the best information that we can get from one-click LCA in terms of product development is, let's say, the amount of the CO2 that each material gives to the product. Then we can see we need to focus on, let's say, reducing the steel in our product. That is going to be a good investment in terms of CO2. Or we can also look at our suppliers and see, yes, so there's this one supplier somewhere far away that has really good CO2 results, but then we have to transport it to our factory quite a long way. And then we see that actually it is better to source materials locally and let's use the CO2 for transportation. And then we can, so in one click, we can play with many parameters to see how can we optimize each of them to make sure that the final result is what we want. And then, yeah.
Yes, that's very good. Yes. All right. So, yeah, I think that our time now is almost up. I will add a poll now just to make sure that if you guys would like to be contacted after, either for more information, like for Magdalena's question, or if you'd like to have a demonstration of the software, we can get in touch with you. So I will add here the poll so you can vote on it and let me know if you would like to know more. I see that for some of the people who are already participating in the webinar, I've been in touch with before, so you can also reach out to me directly if you have any questions. Yes, I see a message also here from Stefan. Very interesting feedbacks from both of you. Thank you. Thank you, and thank you all for your presence here. And most of all, thank you, Ernest, for being such a great guest to our webinar, and to also sharing with us your valuable experience. It was very, very nice and very interesting to see how UPB has been working with their sustainability strategy, and how really committed you are, that you are really digging deep into the level of detail of changing your recipes, having EPDs updated faster than what they are like mandatorily being required. So it is this is the kind of attitude for sure that we need if we want to have a zero carbon future. So yes, thank you all for joining, and I hope you have a great Christmas and New Year's. That was our last webinar of the year. So next year we will have many more webinars and courses like the Construction LCA Bootcamp and EPD Bootcamp. So we are for sure going to see you all there.
Okay, thank you for having me.
Thank you, and bye-bye.
Bye.